This week, we'll talk about interviewing techniques to help you get the information and quotes you need to write your story. First is the skill of listening and encouraging. And then we'll talk about what questions you need to ask. We'll start this lecture with a quote from American writer John Brady. "No talking journalist ever held a good interview. The whole point of an interview is to let the other person speak, to provide information, verify facts, or simply tell a story. And you can't do that if you are doing all the talking." Listening requires intense concentration, along with empathy, discipline, understanding, and patience. Now remember that listening is not the same as hearing. Now hearing is a physical act, and as long as you're not hearing impaired, it simply happens. Listening, on the other hand, requires concentration to assign meaning to the sounds that we hear. Now, good listening is hearing and understanding. To show your interviewee that you're listening, you want to maintain eye contact. Look at the people that you interview, even when they're not looking at you. Feel free to gaze at your notebook while you're writing. When you aren't looking down, you need to look at your source. Once people get talking, use reassuring body language to encourage them to continue. Now that means nodding your head, tilting it to one side, or leaning forward to show that you're engaged with what it is that your source is saying. You also want to reassure your source verbally with "uh-huh" and similar language. Now this is especially important when you're interviewing someone on the telephone who can't see your reassuring body language. Finally, use silence to your advantage. Now, journalists tend to be talkers, so they're often tempted to fill any silences by asking the next question. Now, try counting to 4 after each response. You'll be surprised at how often the source will continue speaking. Perhaps more importantly, the more you talk, the less you listen. While listening is important, asking questions is also vital to the interview process. You should always have a list of 10 or so questions written out in advance. Now, you should always start every interview with 2 questions. First is the person's name spelling and title. Now, rather than ask, "How do you spell your name?" you'll want to follow the advice presented by Sally Adams in the book Interviewing for Journalists, and instead make a statement that requires confirmation and say, "Can you confirm the spelling of your name for me?" It is of the utmost importance to spell everyone's name properly. So you'll want to verify the spelling, including any special capitalization and punctuation, directly with the source. Even if your source is named Bob Smith, it could be spelled Bobbsmyth. You'll also want the person's title. Now, this could be their job title if the interview is related to their job function, or their age and residence, like a 42-year-old Durham man. Some school newspapers identify student sources by their school major and year, such as a sophomore majoring in chemistry. Now, if you can collect some of this information beforehand, that's great. But again, always verify it with the source. Now, while you're asking the source's name, ask them to verify their gender pronouns. Now, after you confirm you're talking to Bobbsmyth, ask Bob, "Can you verify your gender pronouns for me?" Never assume that Bob is a he. He may very well be, in which case you've taken 5 seconds out of his busy schedule. If he isn't, you've saved yourself and your publication a giant embarrassment. And much more importantly, refer to Bob correctly with the respect that Bob deserves. Now, the most commonly used pronouns are he, she, and they, but there are a number of others. Now, if Bob shared with you one you haven't heard before, the LGBT Resource Center at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee has a great resource page on gender pronouns that you can use to ensure you're referring to Bob properly throughout the story. Or, depending on the story, you can just leave gender out of it and say Smith instead of using a pronoun. Now, with your first 2 questions asked and out of the way, you want to make sure you ask 2 last questions. Now, the first is there anything else you would like to add? As thorough as your research might have been, it's possible your source has a burning desire to talk about something that you didn't bring up. This gives your source the opportunity to share that story. And if they don't have anything to add, ask, can I contact you if I have any additional questions? Then, if you do have a question, be sure to visit, call, or email the source back. If you are at all unsure about anything, verify that information later with your source. There are two main types of questions, closed and open. Now, closed questions typically yield yes and no answers or other very short responses. Now, these can be good for establishing essentials at the beginning of the interview, but typically you want to go with open questions as they elicit better responses. For example, who did you vote for in the last presidential election? Will typically get you a one-word answer. But what was your impression of the major party candidates in the last presidential election could get you several paragraphs. Now, something your source says about those presidential candidates could elicit a follow-up question that's not written on your sheet. Novice journalists can sometimes be so focused on getting to the next question that they don't really listen to what the source says and can miss the opportunity for follow-up questions. Perhaps the source mentioned he met one of the presidential candidates several years ago, and that person is even scummier now. That's something that warrants following up on. Your question could be as simple as, tell me more about that meeting. Now, if you ever aren't sure about what a source is saying, ask clarification questions. So, after college, you moved to Daytona Beach and then to Miami? Now, if you're wrong, the source will correct you. And if you're right, then you'll know that you have your facts straight. You want to keep your questions short, simple, and clear. Never ask a two-part question, such as how do you plan to find funding for the new road project and how you convince the city to close down the Durham freeway during construction. The source is liable to forget the second part of the question while answering the first, or vice versa. Don't be afraid to ask a question more than once if you don't get an answer the first time. In a February 2017 interview with Republican Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, NPR Morning Edition host David Green asks Jordan, does that mean that you would be leaving some lower-income Americans without help to get health insurance? Jordan didn't exactly answer the question, so Green asked again. Now, if people won't get these tax credits if they don't pay taxes, does that mean some low-income people will be left out? And then a third and final time, but isn't one problem you confront that low-income people who don't pay taxes might not get help to get insurance? That is a possibility here, until Jordan actually addresses the issue more directly. Finally, if you're interviewing a prominent person who gets interviewed a lot, try asking something that they haven't been asked before. Many years ago, I had a telephone interview with jazz bassist Christian McBride. I asked him about a song he recorded with vocalist Dee Dee Bridgewater called Do It Again, where he and Dee Dee have what I'll call a salty banter. Now, I didn't ask him about the recording process or what working with Dee Dee was like. I asked him if his mother had heard the song yet. He laughed and said that he didn't think so. Now that was something no one had thought to ask him before.